On a deserted mountain highway, a single father fixes a stranded billionaire's car, then refuses her money and disappears. But she recognizes him. He's the man who saved her years ago, and now she won't let him vanish again. A story about fate, trust, and a love that can't be avoided, where the past collides with the present and changes everything. Stay until the end, hit like, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The mountain highway stretched out empty in both directions, nothing but cracked asphalt and pine trees leaning hard against the wind. Caleb Hayes had driven this route 1,000 times, maybe more. He knew every turn, every pothole, every place where the shoulder dropped off into nothing. It was quiet up here. That's what he liked about it. He wasn't in a hurry. His daughter Emma was at her friend's house until 5, and he'd finished the last oil change at the garage just after noon. A rare afternoon with no demands. He'd taken the long way home, windows down, letting the cold air cut through the cab of his truck. The radio was off. He didn't need it. Up here, the silence was enough. Then he saw the car. It sat tilted on the shoulder about a quarter-mile ahead, hazard lights blinking slow and steady. Sleek black paint, low profile, foreign plates. The kind of car that didn't belong on a mountain road in the middle of nowhere. Caleb eased off the gas and pulled up behind it, leaving his truck running. He stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and walked toward the driver's side. The window came down before he reached it. "Thank God," the woman inside said. Her voice was smooth, controlled, but there was an edge underneath. "I've been stuck here for 20 minutes. Caleb stopped a few feet from the door and glanced at the car. The front end was angled down, right tire sitting flat against the rim. He looked back at her. She was younger than he'd expected. Late 20s, maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back tight, sharp cheekbones, eyes that didn't blink much. She wore a black jacket over a white shirt, no jewelry except a watch that probably cost more than his truck. Everything about her was clean, precise, expensive. "Flat tire," he said. "I know that," she said, not unkindly. "Do you have a phone? Mine's not getting service." Caleb pulled his phone from his pocket and checked the screen. 1 bar. "Same here. You got a spare?" She hesitated. "I think so. I've never actually checked." He nodded and walked to the back of the car, crouching down to pop the trunk latch from the inside release she hit. The trunk opened smooth and quiet. Inside was a compact spare, still wrapped in plastic, and a kit with a jack that looked like it had never been touched. "You're in luck," he called out. She got out of the car and came around to where he was standing. Up close, she was taller than he'd thought. She moved carefully, like someone used to being watched. "How long will it take?" she asked. 10 minutes, Caleb said, pulling the spare out and setting it on the ground. "Maybe 15. I can pay you." "Don't need it." She frowned. "I insist." "Still don't need it." He knelt down and started positioning the jack under the frame. "You heading somewhere important?" "A meeting," she said. "I'm already late." "Then you should call and tell them you'll be later." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she stood there with her arms crossed, watching him work. Caleb didn't mind. He'd done this 100 times, muscle memory taking over. Loosen the lug nuts, jack up the car, pull the flat, mount the spare, tighten everything back down. Simple. "Where are you from?" she asked after a while. "About 15 miles south," Caleb said, not looking up. "Little town called Mercer." "I've never heard of it." "Most people haven't." She was quiet again. He could feel her watching him, studying him maybe. People did that sometimes. He didn't take it personally. "What do you do?" she asked. "I fix cars." "You own a shop?" "Work at one." Another pause, then, "You do this often?" "Stop for strangers." Caleb glanced up at her. "When I see someone who needs help." "That's kind of you." He shrugged and went back to tightening the last lug nut. "It's just a tire." When he finished, he stood up and wiped his hands on his jeans. The spare wasn't going to last long, but it'd get her wherever she needed to go. He lowered the jack, packed everything back into the trunk, and closed it with a solid thunk. "You're all set," he said, "but that spare's not meant for long distances. You'll want to get a real tire on there soon." She nodded. "I will. Thank you." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a wallet, flipping it open. Caleb saw the edge of several crisp bills. "Really?" she said, holding one out. Please. Really? Caleb said, stepping back toward his truck. I'm good. She stood there for a moment, bill still in her hand, looking at him like he'd just said something in a language she didn't understand. Then she put the wallet away. Can I at least get your name? She asked. Caleb. Caleb, she repeated, like she was testing it. I'm Vivian. He nodded. Drive safe, Vivian. He turned and walked back to his truck, climbed in, and put it in gear. In the rearview mirror, he saw her still standing there, watching him pull away. He didn't think much of it. People got stranded all the time. He helped when he could. That was it. But for Vivian Cole, standing alone on that empty mountain road, it wasn't just a flat tire. It wasn't just a stranger who'd stopped to help. It was something else entirely. Because she knew that face. She knew that voice. And as Caleb's truck disappeared around the bend, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. A jolt of recognition so sharp it left her breathless. She'd met him before. Not recently. Not casually. Years ago. On a night she'd spent a long time trying to forget. Vivian got back into her car, hands shaking slightly as she gripped the wheel. She sat there for a full minute, staring at the road ahead, her mind racing backward through time. It had been 8 years. Maybe 9. She'd been 22, reckless, angry at the world. She'd gone to a party in some dive bar outside the city, the kind of place she had no business being in. She'd been drinking too much, arguing with people she barely knew, making bad decisions just to prove she could. And then things had gone wrong. She remembered the parking lot, the man who'd followed her out, the way his hand had closed around her wrist, the fear that had cut through the alcohol haze, sharp and cold. And then someone else had been there. Caleb. He hadn't known her. Hadn't asked questions. He'd just stepped in, calm and solid, and told the man to leave. When the man didn't, Caleb had made him. Not violently, not with threats, just with presence. The kind of presence that made it clear the situation was over. Afterward, he'd walked her to her car, made sure she was okay, told her to get home safe. She'd been too shaken to say much. She'd thanked him, barely, and driven off. By the time she'd sobered up the next day, she couldn't remember his name, couldn't remember where the bar had been. Just the feeling of being saved by a stranger who'd asked for nothing in return. She'd thought about him sometimes over the years, wondered who he was. Told herself it didn't matter, but now she knew. Vivian started the car and pulled back onto the road, her meeting forgotten. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. Caleb had no idea who she was. That much was obvious. He'd looked at her like she was just another person with a problem he could fix. No recognition, no memory. But she remembered, and she wasn't going to let him disappear again. She drove back toward the city, but halfway there, she pulled off at a rest stop and sat in the parking lot with the engine running. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop. Her assistant. Her CFO. 3 board members. She ignored all of them. Vivian Cole was not someone who ignored calls. She was the founder and CEO of Cole Industries, a tech conglomerate worth just over $4 billion. She'd built it from nothing in less than a decade. She was on magazine covers. She gave TED Talks. She had 2,000 employees across 6 countries. She was also 29 years old, and she'd spent the last 8 years working herself half to death trying to outrun the person she used to be, the reckless girl, the angry girl, the girl who'd almost gotten herself hurt in a dive bar parking lot because she didn't care what happened to her. Caleb had saved her that night, not just from the man who'd grabbed her, but from something worse. He'd reminded her, in that brief interaction, that there were still people in the world who did the right thing without needing a reason. It had stuck with her. Longer than she'd expected, deeper than she wanted to admit. And now, 8 years later, she'd found him again. She picked up her phone and opened a browser, typing in the name of the town he'd mentioned. Mercer. It was tiny. Population just under 2,000. 1 main street, a few shops, a couple of churches. The kind of place people left, not the kind they moved to. She searched for auto repair shops. There were 2. One looked like it hadn't updated its website since 2005. The other was called Hank's Garage. She clicked on it. No staff photos, no names listed, just an address and a phone number. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she made a decision. She wasn't going back to the city. Not yet. She was going to Mercer. Caleb got home just after 3. The house was quiet. the way it always was when Emma wasn't there. He liked the quiet, but he liked her noise more. The way she talked nonstop about school, her friends, the new book she was reading. She filled the space in a way that made it feel less empty. He kicked off his boots by the door and walked into the kitchen, grabbing a beer from the fridge. He wasn't much of a drinker, but it had been a long week. He leaned against the counter and took a long pull, letting the cold settle in his chest. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living room with a couch that sagged in the middle. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. He'd bought it 3 years ago with money he'd saved working double shifts at the garage. Emma had her own room. That's what mattered. He thought about the woman on the highway. Vivian. She'd looked at him like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. People did that sometimes when they weren't used to being helped without strings attached. He didn't take it personally. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Emma's friend's mom. She's having a great time. Okay if she stays for dinner? Caleb typed back. Sure, I'll pick her up at 7. That gave him a few more hours. He finished the beer, tossed the bottle in the recycling, and headed out to the garage behind the house. It wasn't much, just a single car space with a workbench and a few tools. But it was where he went when he needed to think. He had a project sitting on the bench. An old carburetor from a '72 Chevy, completely seized up. He'd been working on it for a week, soaking parts in solvent, scrubbing away decades of rust and oil. It was tedious work, but he liked it. There was something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. He pulled on a pair of gloves and got to work, losing himself in the rhythm of it. Disassemble, clean, inspect, reassemble. He'd done it so many times he didn't have to think. His hands knew what to do. But his mind kept drifting back to the woman, to Vivian. There was something about the way she'd looked at him, not grateful exactly. Something else, something he couldn't quite name. He tried to shake it off. It didn't matter. She was just passing through. He'd probably never see her again. But part of him wondered if that was true. Met. Vivian checked into the only hotel in Mercer just after 5. It was called the Pine Lodge, and calling it a hotel was generous. It was more like a motel with delusions of grandeur, faded paint, creaky floors, a front desk staffed by a teenager who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. How long you staying? The kid asked, barely looking up from his phone. I'm not sure yet, Vivian said. A few days, maybe. He shrugged and handed her a key. Actual metal key, not a card. Room 12. The room was exactly what she'd expected. Small bed, scratch furniture, a TV that probably got 3 channels. But it was clean, and it had a window that looked out over the main street. She dropped her bag on the bed and stood at the window, watching the town move at its slow, deliberate pace. A couple walking their dog. A man locking up a hardware store. A teenager on a skateboard weaving between parked cars. It was so different from the city. From her life. From everything she'd built. And yet, standing there, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Calm. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. Vivian? Thank God, the woman said immediately. Where are you? You missed the meeting with the investors and… I know, Vivian said. Something came up. I need you to reschedule everything for the next few days. There was a pause. Everything? Everything. Vivian, you have the keynote on Thursday. The board meeting on Friday, reschedule it. Another pause, longer this time. Are you okay? I'm fine, Vivian said. I just need a few days. Where are you? Somewhere quiet. She hung up before her assistant could ask more questions. Then she turned off her phone and set it on the nightstand. For the first time in years, Vivian Cole had nowhere to be, and she had no idea what to do with that. 1. Caleb picked Emma up at 7 sharp. She came running out of her friend's house with her backpack bouncing, blonde hair flying, talking before she even reached the truck. Dad, you won't believe what happened. We made slime, and it got everywhere. And Mrs. Peterson said it was okay, but I don't think it was actually okay because she looked kind of mad, but she didn't yell. And then we watched a movie and… Breathe, Caleb said, smiling as she climbed into the passenger seat. She took a dramatic breath, then kept going. And then we had pizza, and I ate 3 slices, which is probably too much, but Mrs. Peterson said it was fine, and… Seatbelt, Caleb said. She buckled in without stopping her story. Caleb pulled out of the driveway and headed home, listening to her talk. He didn't catch every word, but he didn't need to. This was his favorite part of the day. Just the two of them. Her voice filling the truck. The world outside reduced to something simple and good. "What did you do today?" Emma asked eventually, pausing long enough to let him answer. "Fix cars," Caleb said. "That's all you ever do?" "Pretty much." "Was it boring?" "Not too bad." "Did anything interesting happen?" He thought about Vivian, about the tire, about the way she'd looked at him like she knew something he didn't. "Not really," he said. Emma seemed satisfied with that and went back to talking about slime. Caleb let her, content to just drive and listen. When they got home, Emma ran inside and immediately started pulling out art supplies. She was working on some kind of project for school, something involving construction paper and way too much glue. Caleb made her a sandwich, set it on the table, and told her to eat before she started. "I'm not hungry," she said, already cutting paper. "Eat anyway." She sighed dramatically but picked up the sandwich. Caleb leaned against the counter and watched her work, marveling at how much she looked like her mother. Same blonde hair, same blue eyes, same fierce determination when she set her mind to something. Her mother had been gone for 3 years now. Car accident, quick and senseless and final. Emma had been 6. She remembered her mom, but not the way Caleb did. For Emma, her mother was already becoming more memory than person. Caleb didn't know if that was better or worse. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever get lonely?" The question caught him off guard. He set his beer down and looked at her. "Where's that coming from?" he asked gently. She shrugged, not looking up from her project. "Mrs. Peterson was talking to her husband today, and they were laughing a lot, and I just thought, you don't really laugh a lot. Not like that." Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. He walked over and sat down next to her. "I laugh," he said. "Not the same way." He didn't know what to say to that. She was right. He didn't laugh much. Didn't do much of anything except work and take care of her. That was enough. It had to be. "I'm okay, kiddo," he said quietly. "You don't have to worry about me." "I'm not worried," Emma said. "I just thought maybe you should have friends or something." "I have friends." "Hank doesn't count. He's your boss." Caleb smiled despite himself. "Fair point. Maybe you should meet someone." "Like who?" "I don't know. A lady or something." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "A lady or something?" "Yeah, like how Mia's dad has a girlfriend now and they go on dates and stuff." "That's different." "Why?" "Because," Caleb said, and then realized he didn't have a good answer. Emma looked at him with those sharp blue eyes, waiting. "I'm fine the way things are," Caleb said finally. "I've got you. That's all I need." Emma seemed to accept that, though she didn't look entirely convinced. She went back to her project, and Caleb sat there a moment longer before standing up and heading to the kitchen. But Emma's words stayed with him. "Do you ever get lonely?" He told himself he didn't. Told himself he was too busy, too focused on being a good father, to think about anything else. But standing there in the kitchen, thinking about the woman on the highway, he wondered if that was really true. The next morning, Vivian woke up early. She wasn't used to small-town quiet. No traffic, no sirens, no construction, just birds and wind and the faint sound of someone starting a truck down the street. She got dressed and walked into town, which took all of 3 minutes. The main street was already awake. A couple of shops were open. A diner had a handful of cars parked outside. People moved slow, said good morning to each other, didn't seem in any particular hurry. Vivian walked until she found what she was looking for. Hank's garage. It was a squat brick building at the edge of town, 2 bay doors open, the sound of tools clanging inside. A hand-painted sign hung above the entrance, faded but still readable. She stood across the street for a moment, watching. She could see figures moving inside. One of them might be Caleb. She didn't know what she was doing here, didn't know what she was going to say, but she crossed the street anyway. She walked into the garage slowly, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. It smelled like oil and metal and something burnt. A man in his 50s with grease-stained hands and a flannel shirt looked up from a workbench. "Help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for Caleb," Vivian said. The man studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the far bay. "He's under the Chevy," Vivian walked over. She could see a pair of boots sticking out from under a rusted pickup truck. She stopped a few feet away and waited. After a moment, Caleb rolled out from under the truck on a creeper, a wrench in one hand. He saw her and went still. "Vivian," he said. "Hi," she said. He sat up slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "What are you doing here?" "I'm still in town. I can see that. I wanted to talk to you." Caleb glanced at the man in the flannel shirt, who was very obviously pretending not to listen. Then he looked back at Vivian. "About what?" he asked. "About yesterday," she said. "About us." "There's no us," Caleb said, not unkindly. "You were stuck. I helped. That's it." "That's not it," Vivian said quietly. Caleb stood up, setting the wrench down on a nearby tool cart. He crossed his arms and looked at her, waiting. Vivian took a breath. "Do you remember me?" she asked again. Caleb hesitated. Then he nodded. "Yeah, I remember." "Do you remember what you did?" "I helped you, same as yesterday." "You did more than that," Vivian said. "You made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth helping. I was in a bad place back then, Caleb, really bad. And what you did, it stayed with me." Caleb didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking uncomfortable. "I've been thinking about that night for years," Vivian continued, "wondering who you were, wondering if I'd ever see you again. And then yesterday, there you were, on the side of the road, helping me. Again." "It was just a tire," Caleb said. "It wasn't just a tire," Vivian said firmly. "Not to me." The man in the flannel shirt, Hank, she assumed, cleared his throat loudly and walked out of the garage, leaving them alone. Caleb sighed. "Look, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm glad I could help, both times, but I'm just a guy who fixes cars, that's all." "I don't believe that," Vivian said. "Why not?" "Because people who are just anything don't stop on empty highways to help strangers. They don't walk women to their cars to make sure they're safe. They don't refuse money when someone tries to thank them." "Plenty of people do that," Caleb said. "Not in my world." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Why are you really here, Vivian?" She didn't answer right away. She'd been asking herself the same question since she'd pulled into town. Why was she here? What did she want from him? The truth was, she didn't know. All she knew was that standing in front of him felt like the first real thing she'd done in years. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I just know I couldn't leave without seeing you again." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of grease near his temple. "I've got a daughter," he said quietly. "And a life that I can't just—" He trailed off like he didn't know how to finish. "I'm not asking you for anything," Vivian said. "I just wanted you to know that what you did mattered. That's all." She turned to leave, but Caleb's voice stopped her. "Vivian." She looked back. "If you want to talk," he said slowly, "there's a diner 2 blocks down. I take my lunch there most days around noon." Vivian felt something warm spread through her chest. "I'll be there," she said, and then she walked out before he could change his mind. Sam. At noon, Caleb walked into Rosie's and found Vivian already sitting in a booth by the window. She'd ordered coffee for both of them. He slid into the seat across from her without a word. Rosie came over, smiling. "Well, look who's back. You two becoming regulars?" "Just coffee today, Rosie," Caleb said. "You sure? Got fresh pie?" "Maybe later." Rosie walked off, and Caleb wrapped his hands around the mug in front of him. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I wanted to," Vivian said. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Vivian said, "Tell me about your daughter." Caleb looked up, surprised. "What?" "Your daughter. You mentioned her yesterday. What's her name?" "Emma," Caleb said slowly. "How old is she?" 9. "What's she like?" Caleb didn't know how to answer that. He wasn't used to people asking about Emma. Most people in town already knew her, and he didn't really talk to people outside of town. "She's smart," he said finally. "Talks a lot, loves art, makes these elaborate projects with construction paper and glue and glitter that end up all over the house." Vivian smiled. "She sounds wonderful." "She is." "Is it just the two of you?" Caleb hesitated, then he nodded. "Her mom died 3 years ago. Car accident." "I'm sorry," Vivian said, and she sounded like she meant it. Thanks. That must be hard, raising her on your own. It is, Caleb said, but she's worth it. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. You're a good father. You don't know that. I can tell. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. He took a drink of coffee and changed the subject. What about you? He asked. What do you do? Vivian hesitated. Then she said, I run a company. What kind of company? Tech, software mostly. That sounds complicated. It is. You enjoy it? Wait. Vivian considered that. Sometimes. Other times it feels like I'm just going through the motions. Then why do it? Because I built it, she said. Because it's mine. Because I don't know what else I'd do. Caleb nodded. He understood that. Work was work. You did it because you had to, because it was yours, because stopping felt like giving up. Do you ever take breaks? He asked. Not really. Maybe you should, Vivian smiled. Is that what this is? A break? I don't know, Caleb said. Is it? She looked at him, something soft in her expression. Yeah, she said. I think it is. They talked for another hour. About nothing, mostly. About the town, the weather, the garage. Small things. Easy things. Caleb found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in a long time. Vivian was easy to talk to. She listened more than she spoke. She didn't try to fill every silence. She just was. When they finally left, Caleb walked her back to her car. She stopped before getting in and turned to face him. Can I see you again? She asked. Caleb hesitated. He knew he should say no, knew this was a bad idea. She was from a different world, a world he didn't fit into and didn't want to. But looking at her, standing there in the afternoon sunlight, he couldn't bring himself to say it. Tomorrow, he said. Same time. Vivian smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her, and it changed her whole face. Tomorrow, she said. And then she got in her car and drove away, leaving Caleb standing on the sidewalk, wondering what the hell he was doing. Over the next week, Vivian became a regular at Rosie's Diner. She'd show up at noon, always in the same booth, always with 2 cups of coffee already ordered. Caleb would walk in, covered in grease and oil, slide into the seat across from her, and they'd talk until his lunch break ran out. It became routine. Easy. Something Caleb looked forward to without quite admitting it to himself. On the 5th day, Emma asked about it. You've been coming home late, she said, not looking up from her homework. Caleb was washing dishes at the sink. He stopped, hands still in the soapy water. I'm not late. I'm on time. You used to be early. Since when do you keep track? Since you started smiling more. That made him turn around. Emma was watching him with that sharp, knowing look that reminded him way too much of her mother. I smile, Caleb said. Not like this. Like what? Like you're thinking about something good. Caleb dried his hands on a towel and sat down across from her at the table. I met someone, he said carefully. We've been having lunch. Emma's eyes lit up. Is it a lady? Yeah. Is she nice? She is. Is she pretty? Caleb felt his face warm. That's not really. She is. Emma practically bounced in her seat. Dad, that's so cool. What's her name? Vivian. That's a fancy name? Is she from here? No, she's just visiting. Emma's excitement dimmed a little. Oh, so she's leaving? Eventually, yeah. That's sad. Caleb nodded. It was sad. He'd been trying not to think about it. Can I meet her? Emma asked. I don't know if that's a good idea. Why not? Because it's just lunch, Em. It's not serious. Emma gave him a look that said she didn't believe him for a second. You like her? I barely know her. But you like her. Caleb didn't answer. Emma grinned and went back to her homework, clearly pleased with herself. That night, lying in bed, Caleb stared at the ceiling and thought about what Emma had said. Did he like Vivian? He barely knew her. They'd spent maybe 10 hours together total, most of it talking about nothing important. She was leaving soon, going back to her real life. This was just a break for her, a detour. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her sitting across from him in that booth, hands wrapped around her coffee cup, listening to him talk about Emma's latest art project like it was the most interesting thing she'd heard all day. Yeah, he liked her. And that was a problem. The next day, Vivian wasn't at the diner. Caleb walked in at noon like always, but the booth was empty. He stood in the doorway for a moment, uncertain. Rosie waved him over. She called, Rosie said. Said she couldn't make it today. Left you a message. She handed him a folded napkin. Caleb opened it. Something came up. I'm sorry. Tomorrow? Underneath was a phone number. Caleb stared at it for a long moment. Then he folded the napkin and put it in his pocket. You want your usual booth? Rosie asked. No, Caleb said. I'll just head back. He walked out before she could say anything else. The walk back to the garage felt longer than usual. He told himself it was fine. She had a life, a company to run. She couldn't spend every day in a diner in the middle of nowhere, but it bothered him more than it should have. When he got back to the garage, Hank was waiting for him, leaning against the workbench with his arms crossed. She didn't show, huh? Hank said. How'd you know? Because you look like someone just canceled Christmas. Caleb grabbed a wrench and walked over to the truck he'd been working on. I'm fine. Sure you are. Drop it, Hank. Hank didn't drop it. He followed Caleb over to the truck and stood there watching him work. You know what your problem is? Hank said. I'm guessing you're about to tell me. Your problem is you think you don't deserve good things. Caleb stopped and looked at him. What? You heard me. You're a good guy, Caleb. You work hard. You're a great dad. And you've been alone for 3 years because you think that's what you deserve. That's not... It is, Hank said firmly. And now you've got a woman who's actually interested in you, and you're already looking for reasons to push her away. She's leaving, Hank. She's got a whole life somewhere else. This isn't real. Maybe it could be. How? She's a billionaire. I fix cars. We don't live in the same world. So what? You think money's the only thing that matters? I think it matters enough. Hank shook his head. You're making excuses. You're scared, and I get it, but don't let that keep you from something good. Caleb didn't respond. He went back to work, and after a moment, Hank walked away. But his words stuck. That night, Caleb pulled out the napkin and stared at Vivian's number. He picked up his phone 3 times before finally typing out a message. Everything okay? The response came less than a minute later. Yes. Just had to deal with work stuff. I'm sorry I missed lunch. Caleb hesitated, then typed, Want to try again tomorrow? I'd like that. He set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Emma wandered into the kitchen holding a book. Was that her? She asked. Yeah. You're smiling again. Am I? Yep. Emma hopped up onto the counter next to him. You should invite her over. I'm serious. I want to meet her. It's complicated. Why? Because she's not staying, and I don't want you getting attached to someone who's going to leave. Emma looked at him with those 2 wise eyes. Dad, people leave. Mom left. But that doesn't mean we stop letting people in. Caleb felt something crack in his chest. He pulled Emma into a hug, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. When'd you get so smart? He asked quietly. I've always been smart. You just don't listen. He laughed despite himself. Fair enough. The next day, Vivian was back at the diner. But she looked different, tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she'd pulled her hair back in a messy ponytail instead of her usual sleek style. Rough night? Caleb asked as he sat down. Rough week, Vivian said. My CFO quit. The board's breathing down my neck about Q3 projections, and I have about 50 emails I haven't answered. Why haven't you answered them? Because I'm here. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. He took a sip of coffee and waited. I'm supposed to be back in the city by Friday, Vivian said quietly. I have a board meeting I can't miss. That's 3 days. I know. They sat in silence for a moment. Caleb felt something heavy settle in his chest. So this is it, he said. It doesn't have to be. What's the alternative? You keep driving an hour each way to have lunch with a mechanic? Maybe. Vivian, I know how it sounds, she said. I know this doesn't make sense, but being here with you, it's the first time in years I've felt like I can breathe. Caleb looked at her across the table. Really looked at her. She wasn't the polished, untouchable woman he'd met on the highway. She looked real, vulnerable, human. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. I don't know, she admitted. I just know I'm not ready to walk away yet. Even though you have to? Even though I have to. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. My daughter wants to meet you. Vivian's eyes widened slightly. She does? She's 9. She's nosy. And she's figured out that I've been having lunch with someone. What did you tell her? That you're just visiting. That it's not serious. Is that what you think this is? Caleb met her gaze. I don't know what this is. Neither do I, Vivian said. But I'd like to meet her, if you're okay with that. Caleb thought about Emma's words. People leave, but that doesn't mean we stop letting people in. Okay, he said. Tomorrow's Saturday. Come by the house around 2. Vivian smiled, and some of the tiredness left her face. I'll be there. Saturday came too fast. Caleb spent the morning cleaning the house, which made Emma laugh because he never cleaned unless someone was coming over. You really like her, Emma said, watching him wipe down the kitchen counter for the 3rd time. I just want the house to look decent. Sure, Dad. At 2 o'clock sharp, there was a knock on the door. Caleb opened it to find Vivian standing on the porch, holding a bag from the bakery in town. I brought cookies, she said. I didn't know what else to bring. You didn't have to bring anything. I wanted to make a good impression. Before Caleb could respond, Emma appeared behind him, craning her neck to see. Hi, Emma said brightly. I'm Emma. Hi, Emma, Vivian said, smiling. I'm Vivian. I know, Dad's been talking about you. Emma, Caleb said, a warning in his voice. Emma ignored him and pulled the door wider. Come in. Do you want to see my room? I've been working on a project. Vivian glanced at Caleb, who shrugged helplessly. Go ahead. Fair warning, there's glitter everywhere. Vivian followed Emma down the hall, and Caleb stood in the doorway, listening to his daughter chatter nonstop about her latest art project. He'd been nervous about this, about letting Vivian into this part of his life. But hearing Emma's laughter, seeing how easily she'd taken to Vivian, some of that nervousness faded. 20 minutes later, they emerged from Emma's room. Vivian had a streak of glitter on her cheek. Your daughter is incredibly talented, Vivian said. She gets it from her mom, Caleb said. Emma beamed. Can Vivian stay for dinner? She probably has. I'd love to, Vivian said. Caleb looked at her. You sure? I'm sure. Dinner was simple, spaghetti and garlic bread, nothing fancy. But Emma talked the entire time, asking Vivian a million questions about her life, her job, the city. Vivian answered everyone patiently, never talking down to her, treating her like an equal. After dinner, Emma insisted they play a board game. They ended up on the living room floor playing a worn copy of Monopoly that had been missing half its pieces for years. Emma made up new rules as they went, and Vivian went along with it, laughing when Emma declared herself the winner, even though she'd definitely cheated. When it was time for Emma to get ready for bed, she hugged Vivian goodnight without hesitation. You're really nice, Emma said. I hope you come back. Me too, Vivian said quietly. After Emma disappeared into her room, Caleb walked Vivian out to her car. The sun had set, leaving the street bathed in the yellow glow of the streetlights. Thank you for today, Vivian said. She liked you. I liked her. She's wonderful, Caleb. You've done an amazing job with her. I'm just trying not to screw it up. Vivian smiled. You're not screwing it up. They stood there for a moment, neither of them moving. Then Vivian said, I leave on Friday. I know. I don't want to. But you have to. Yeah. She looked down at her hands. I've been thinking, maybe I could come back. On weekends, or… Vivian. She stopped. Caleb took a breath. You have a life, a company, people depending on you. You can't just drop everything to drive out here every weekend. Why not? Because that's not realistic. Because eventually you'll resent it because you're scared, Vivian said quietly. Caleb didn't deny it. I'm scared too, Vivian continued. I'm terrified, actually, because I've spent the last 8 years building something that's supposed to matter, and none of it feels as real as sitting in that diner with you. That's just because it's new. It'll wear off. Will it? Caleb didn't have an answer for that. Vivian stepped closer. I'm not asking you to have all the answers, Caleb. I'm just asking you not to shut this down before we even see what it could be. And what if it doesn't work? What if you come back a few times and realize this life is too small for you? What then? Then we figure it out. It's not that simple. I've got Emma to think about. I can't let her get attached to someone who might not stick around. I would never hurt her, not on purpose, but people leave, Vivian, even when they don't mean to. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Vivian's expression softened. This is about your wife, she said gently. Caleb looked away. She didn't choose to leave, but she still did. And Emma lost her. I can't let that happen again. I'm not her, Caleb. I know that. Do you? He met her eyes. I know you're not trying to hurt us, but that doesn't mean it won't happen anyway. Vivian took a step back and Caleb saw something shift in her expression. Hurt, maybe. Or disappointment. I should go, she said quietly. Vivian, no, it's fine, you're right, this was a bad idea. She got in her car before he could stop her. He stood there, watching her drive away, feeling like he had just made a terrible mistake. Inside, Emma was supposed to be asleep. But when Caleb walked past her room, he saw the light still on under the door. He knocked and pushed it open. Emma was sitting up in bed, her arms crossed. You let her leave, Emma said. She had to go. No, she didn't. You pushed her away. I heard you, Dad. I heard what you said about how people leave. Caleb sat down on the edge of her bed. I'm just trying to protect you. From what? From being happy? From getting hurt? Emma looked at him with those two old eyes. Mom leaving hurt. But you know what hurts more? Watching you be alone because you're too scared to let anyone in. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You like her. She likes you. Why can't that be enough? Because she has a whole life somewhere else. And we have ours here. Those two things don't fit together. Maybe they could if you'd let them. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. He kissed Emma's forehead and told her to get some sleep. But lying in bed that night, her words echoed in his head. Maybe they could if you'd let them. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Caleb threw himself into work, staying late at the garage, taking on extra projects, anything to keep his mind busy. Vivian didn't come back to the diner. He told himself that was for the best. Clean break. No messy goodbyes. She'd go back to her life, and he'd go back to his, and eventually they'd both forget this ever happened. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. About the way she'd looked at Emma like she was the most interesting person in the world. About the way she'd sat on his living room floor playing a game with half the pieces missing and hadn't complained once. About the way she'd said his name, soft and certain, like it meant something. On Thursday night, Emma didn't speak to him at dinner. She ate in silence, then went to her room without saying goodnight. Caleb stood outside her door, hand raised to knock, but couldn't bring himself to do it. Friday morning, he woke up to a text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Vivian. I'm leaving today. I wanted to say goodbye, but I don't think you want to hear from me. Thank you for letting me into your life, even for a little while. Take care of Emma. And take care of yourself. Caleb stared at the message for a long time. Then he got up, got dressed, and went to work like it was any other day. But it wasn't any other day. And as he stood in the garage, hands covered in grease, he realized something. He'd done it again. He'd let someone go because he was too scared to hold on. His phone buzzed. A message from Emma's school. She was sick. Could he pick her up? Caleb drove to the school and found Emma sitting in the nurse's office, looking small and pale. Hey, kiddo, he said gently. What's wrong? My stomach hurts. The nurse gave him a sympathetic look. She's been like this all morning. No fever, though. Might just need to rest at home. Caleb signed her out and drove her home in silence. When they got there, Emma went straight to her room and closed the door. Caleb stood in the hallway, staring at that closed door, and felt something break inside him. He knocked. Em, can I come in? No. Please. Silence. Then, fine. He opened the door. Emma was lying on her bed, facing the wall. Caleb sat down next to her. You're not really sick, are you? My stomach does hurt. Because you're upset. Emma didn't answer. I'm sorry, Caleb said quietly. I know I messed up. She was nice, Dad, and you let her go. I was trying to protect you. Emma rolled over to look at him. Her eyes were red. You can't protect me from everything. and you shouldn't have to be alone just to keep me safe. I'm not alone. I have you. That's not the same, and you know it. Caleb felt his throat tighten. I don't know how to do this, Em. I don't know how to let someone in when I'm this scared of losing them. Then maybe you need to be brave. I'm not brave. Yes, you are. You're the bravest person I know. Caleb pulled her into a hug, and she wrapped her arms around him tight. What if I call her and she doesn't answer? He asked. Then you call again. What if it's too late? Then at least you tried. Caleb held his daughter for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. He stared at Vivian's message. Then he typed a response. Where are you? The reply came almost immediately. Airport, my flight leaves in an hour. Caleb looked at Emma. She nodded. He stood up. I'll be back, he said. Emma smiled. Go get her, Dad. Caleb ran. He grabbed his keys, jumped in his truck, and drove faster than he probably should have. The airport was 40 minutes away. He had an hour, maybe less. He made it in 35. He parked in a loading zone and ran inside, scanning the departures board. Her flight was already boarding. He ran to security, but stopped short. He couldn't get through without a ticket. He pulled out his phone and called her. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, Caleb? Where are you? He asked, breathing hard. I'm at my gate. Don't get on that plane. Silence. Vivian, please, don't get on that plane. Why not? Because I was wrong. Because I'm an idiot. Because... He stopped, trying to catch his breath. Because Emma's right. I've been so scared of losing people that I forgot how to let them in. And I let you walk away because I was too afraid to ask you to stay. Caleb, I know your life is in the city. I know this doesn't make sense, but I don't care. I want to try. I want to see what this could be. If you'll give me another chance. Another long silence, then, I'm coming down. 10 minutes later, Vivian appeared through the security exit, pulling her suitcase behind her. Her hair was a mess. She looked exhausted. She also looked beautiful. Caleb walked up to her and stopped a few feet away. Hi, he said. Hi, she said. I'm sorry. I know. I was scared. I know that too. I still am. So am I. They stood there, just looking at each other. I don't know how this works, Caleb said. I don't know how we make this work. Neither do I, Vivian said. But I want to find out. Even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. Caleb closed the distance between them and kissed her. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't smooth, but it was real. And when they pulled apart, Vivian was smiling. I missed my flight, she said. I'll drive you back to town. What about your truck being in a loading zone? We'll deal with it. They walked out together, hand in hand, into whatever came next. The drive back to Mercer felt different. Quieter, but not in a bad way. Vivian sat in the passenger seat of Caleb's truck, her suitcase in the bed, watching the trees blur past. Every few minutes, Caleb would glance over at her like he was making sure she was still there. You're staring, Vivian said without looking at him. Sorry. Don't be sorry, just keep your eyes on the road. He did, but his hand found hers across the center console. She laced her fingers through his, and neither of them said anything for a long time. What are you going to tell your board? Caleb asked eventually. That something came up. They're not going to accept that. They don't have a choice. Vivian, I'll handle it, she said firmly. I've been handling them for 8 years. I can handle them for another week. A week? She looked at him. I can't stay forever, Caleb. I have responsibilities. But I can stay a week. Figure out what this is. What we are. Caleb nodded, but something tightened in his chest. A week felt like nothing, but it was more than he'd thought he'd get an hour ago, so he didn't push. When they got back to town, Caleb drove straight to his house. Emma was sitting on the porch steps, her chin in her hands. When she saw the truck pull up with Vivian inside, her face lit up. You got her! Emma yelled, running toward them. Vivian got out and Emma threw her arms around her waist. Vivian looked surprised for a second, then hugged her back. I thought you left, Emma said, her voice muffled against Vivian's sweater. I almost did, Vivian said, but your dad's very persuasive. Emma pulled back and grinned at Caleb. Told you. Yeah, Caleb said, ruffling her hair. You were right. Don't let it go to your head. That night, Vivian stayed for dinner again. Then Emma insisted she stay to watch a movie. Then it got late, and Caleb offered her the guest room, which was really just the couch with some blankets. You don't have to do that, Vivian said. The hotel's not exactly 5-star, Caleb said. And you've already checked out, haven't you? Vivian nodded. Then stay. It's just a couch. She stayed. The next morning, Caleb woke up early out of habit. He walked into the kitchen to start coffee and found Vivian already awake, sitting at the table with her laptop open. How long have you been up? He asked. A couple hours. Conference call with Tokyo. Caleb poured 2 mugs of coffee and set one in front of her. She smiled up at him, tired but grateful. This is your life, he said, nodding at the laptop. Part of it. How do you do it? The hours, the travel, the constant demands? Vivian closed the laptop. Honestly, I don't know anymore. I used to love it, building something from nothing, proving everyone wrong. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like mine and started feeling like something I had to maintain. Then why keep doing it? Because I don't know what else I'd do. It's all I've known for 8 years. Caleb sat down across from her. You ever think about slowing down? Every day. But slowing down feels like giving up. Maybe it's not giving up. Maybe it's just making space for other things. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. Is that what you want, for me to slow down? I want you to be happy. If that means running a billion-dollar company, then do that. But if it doesn't, then maybe you need to figure out what does. She reached across the table and took his hand. You make me happy. I'm just a mechanic in a town you've never heard of. You're more than that to me. Before Caleb could respond, Emma stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. Is Vivian still here? She asked sleepily. I'm still here, Vivian said, smiling. Good. Emma climbed into the chair next to her. Can you make pancakes, Dad? I can try. The pancakes were uneven and slightly burnt, but nobody complained. They ate together at the small kitchen table, Emma talking nonstop about a science project she was working on. Vivian listened like it was the most important thing in the world. After breakfast, Caleb had to go to the garage. Emma had school. Vivian said she'd stay at the house and catch up on work. You sure you'll be okay here alone? Caleb asked. I'll be fine, go. But when he got to the garage, he couldn't focus. He kept thinking about Vivian sitting in his kitchen, working at his table, existing in his space. It felt surreal, like 2 parts of his life that should never have touched were suddenly overlapping, and he didn't know how to make sense of it. You're distracted, Hank said, walking over. I'm fine. She come back? Caleb nodded. Good. When do I get to meet her? You don't? Come on, I've been hearing about this woman for 2 weeks, and I haven't even seen her face. She's not a circus act, Hank. I'm not saying she is. I'm saying you care about her, which means I should probably know who she is. Caleb sighed. Maybe later. I'll hold you to that. At lunch, Caleb drove home instead of going to Rosie's. He found Vivian in the backyard, sitting on the porch steps with her phone pressed to her ear. She looked tense. I understand that, she was saying, but I need you to push the meeting to next week. No, I don't care if it's inconvenient. Make it work. She hung up and let out a long breath. Everything okay? Caleb asked. My board's threatening to vote me out if I don't come back. Caleb felt his stomach drop. What? They're saying I'm being irresponsible, that I'm putting personal issues ahead of the company. Are they right? Vivian looked at him sharply. Are you saying I should leave? No, I'm asking if they have a point. She stood up and paced across the yard. Maybe they do. Maybe I am being irresponsible. But I've given that company 8 years of my life. I've sacrificed everything for it. And the one time I try to take something for myself, they act like I'm committing treason. So what are you going to do? I don't know. She turned to face him. What do you want me to do? That's not fair. This is your decision. But it affects you. It affects us. Caleb walked over to her and took her hands. I don't want you to resent me. If you stay and things fall apart with your company, you'll blame me. And if you go, I'll always wonder if we could have made this work. So we're stuck. Maybe we are. Vivian pulled her hands away and sat back down on the steps. Caleb sat next to her, and they stayed there in silence for a long time. Finally, Vivian said, I built that company to prove I wasn't the person I used to be, the reckless girl who made bad decisions. I wanted to show the world I was worth something. You don't have to prove that to anyone. Don't I? Every time I look in the mirror, I still see her, the girl who almost got hurt in a parking lot because she didn't care enough about herself to stay safe. That's not who you are now. How do you know? Because I see you, the real you, not the CEO, not the girl from 8 years ago, just you. Vivian looked at him, eyes shining. What if the real me doesn't know how to do this? What if I'm so used to working myself to death that I don't know how to just be? Then we figure it out together. She leaned her head on his shoulder and they sat there until Caleb had to go back to work. That night, Vivian made a decision. She called her assistant and told her to schedule a virtual board meeting for the next day. Then she closed her laptop and didn't open it again. What did you tell them? Caleb asked. That I'm taking a leave of absence, 2 months. My COO can handle things while I'm gone. 2 months? I need time to figure out what I actually want. Not what I think I should want. What I actually want. Caleb didn't know what to say. 2 months was a lifetime compared to the week she'd originally offered, but it was also 2 months of her putting her entire career on hold for something that might not work out. Are you sure? He asked. No, but I'm doing it anyway. The next day, the board meeting went exactly as badly as Vivian had expected. 3 board members threatened to resign. Her CFO called her reckless. Her COO, bless him, said he'd do his best but couldn't promise anything. Vivian listened to all of it, then said, I'll be back in 2 months. Until then, you'll have to manage without me. She ended the call and sat there, staring at the blank screen. You okay? Caleb asked. He'd been sitting quietly in the corner, giving her space. I just blew up my entire life. You took a break. That's not the same thing. It feels the same. He walked over and crouched down in front of her. You can go back any time. If this doesn't work, if you change your mind, you can go back. What if I do change my mind? What if I wake up in a month and realize I made a huge mistake? Then we deal with it. But you won't know unless you try. Vivian nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Vivian stayed at the house. Caleb went to work during the day. Emma went to school. In the evenings, they'd have dinner together, the 3 of them, like some kind of makeshift family. It should have felt strange. It should have felt forced. But it didn't. It felt right. Emma adored Vivian. She'd come home from school and immediately start talking to her about her day, showing her projects, asking for help with homework. Vivian never seemed annoyed or overwhelmed. She'd sit with Emma at the kitchen table, explaining math problems or listening to long, winding stories about playground drama. You're good with her, Caleb said one night after Emma had gone to bed. She's easy to be good with. Still, you didn't have to do all this. I want to. They were sitting on the couch, Vivian's head on his shoulder. It was quiet, comfortable, the kind of quiet Caleb had forgotten existed. Do you miss it? He asked. Your life in the city? Vivian thought about it. I miss parts of it. The work, sometimes. The feeling of building something. But mostly, no. I don't miss the constant pressure. The meetings that go nowhere. The people who only care about me because of what I can do for them. You think that'll change when you go back? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'll realize I don't want to go back at all. Caleb turned to look at her. You'd really give it all up? For the right reason? Yeah, I would. What's the right reason? She looked up at him. You, Emma, this. A life that actually feels like mine. Caleb kissed her then, slow and deliberate, and she kissed him back like she'd been waiting for it. But not everything was easy. There were hard days. Days when Vivian would get a call from her COO about a crisis she couldn't fix from a distance. Days when she'd snap at Caleb for no reason, then apologize an hour later, exhausted and frustrated. Days when Caleb would pull away, scared that she'd wake up and realize she'd made a mistake. One night, about a month in, they had their first real fight. It started over something small. Caleb had worked late and forgotten to text. Vivian had made dinner and waited, and by the time he got home, she was upset. You could have called, she said. I was busy. You're always busy. So are you, or you were before you decided to put your entire life on hold. Vivian went still. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, forget it. No, say it. You think I made a mistake. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Caleb set his keys down and turned to face her. I think you're trying to be someone you're not, and I think eventually you're going to realize that, and you're going to leave. So you're just waiting for me to leave. I'm being realistic. No, you're being a coward. The word hit him like a punch. Excuse me? You heard me. You're so scared of getting hurt that you're sabotaging this before it even has a chance. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm just not pretending this is something it's not. And what is it, Caleb? What do you think this is? I don't know. That's the problem. You've been here a month, playing house, but we both know this isn't real. You're going to go back to your life eventually, and I'm going to be here, and that'll be it. Vivian stared at him, her face pale. You really think that little of me? I think you're used to a life I can't give you, and I think you're going to realize that sooner or later. So what, you're just going to give up? Push me away so you can say you were right all along? I'm trying to protect myself. And Emma. By shutting me out? By being honest. Vivian grabbed her jacket off the back of the chair. I can't do this right now. Where are you going? For a drive. I need to think. Vivian. But she was already out the door. Caleb stood there in the empty kitchen, his heart pounding. He wanted to go after her, wanted to take it all back. But he didn't, because part of him meant every word. Vivian drove for an hour, no destination in mind. She ended up at the same rest stop where she'd pulled over weeks ago, after first seeing Caleb again. She sat in the parking lot, engine off, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Board meeting moved up. They want you back by Friday. Vivian stared at the message. Friday was 3 days away. She could go back. Salvage what was left of her company. Prove to everyone that she wasn't reckless, wasn't irresponsible, wasn't the girl who made bad decisions, or she could stay. Fight for something that might not even want her. She didn't know which scared her more. When she finally drove back to Caleb's house, it was past midnight. The lights were off except for the porch light he always left on for her. She walked inside quietly. Caleb was asleep on the couch, still in his work clothes. He looked exhausted. Vivian sat down on the edge of the couch, and he stirred. You came back, he said, his voice rough with sleep. I always come back. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. I'm sorry for what I said. You weren't wrong. Yes, I was. I was scared, and I took it out on you. Vivian looked down at her hands. My board wants me back on Friday. Caleb went very still. What did you tell them? Nothing yet? What are you going to tell them? I don't know. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Caleb said, If you go back, I'll understand. Will you? I'll try. That's not the same thing. I know. Vivian stood up. I need to sleep. We can talk about this tomorrow. She started toward the guest room, but Caleb caught her hand. Don't go, he said quietly. I'm just going to bed. That's not what I mean. Vivian looked at him and saw everything he wasn't saying written on his face. I'm not leaving, Caleb. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until we figure this out. And if we can't figure it out, then at least we tried. She kissed him, soft and brief, then went to bed. The next morning, Emma knew something was wrong. She was quiet at breakfast, picking at her cereal, watching Caleb and Vivian carefully. Are you guys fighting? She asked finally. No, Caleb said. Yes, Vivian said at the same time. They looked at each other. We had a disagreement, Vivian said, but we're working through it. Is it about you leaving? Vivian's breath caught. How did you? I heard Dad on the phone last night. He was talking to Hank. He said you might have to go back. Caleb closed his eyes. Are you? Emma asked Vivian directly. Are you leaving? Vivian looked at this 9-year-old girl who'd let her into her life without hesitation and felt something break inside her. I don't want to, Vivian said honestly, but I have responsibilities, people depending on me. We depend on you too. Caleb said gently. That's not fair. Why not? It's true. She's part of our family now. It's not that simple. Emma stood up, her eyes bright with tears. Why does everything have to be so complicated? Why can't you just ask her to stay? Because she has a whole life somewhere else. So? She could have a life here too, If you'd let her. Emma ran to her room before either of them could respond. Caleb put his head in his hands. Vivian sat frozen, Emma's words echoing in her head. She could have a life here too. That afternoon, while Caleb was at work and Emma was at school, Vivian made a phone call. "Vivian," her COO said, surprised, "I didn't expect to hear from you. I need to talk to you about the company. Are you coming back?" "That depends. Can you be honest with me about something?" "Of course." "If I step down as CEO, would the company survive?" There was a long pause. "Are you serious?" "Yes." Another pause. "Honestly?" "Yes. It would survive. It might even thrive. You built something incredible, Vivian, but you also built it so well that it doesn't need you every single day anymore." Vivian felt tears sting her eyes. "So I've made myself obsolete." "No. You've made yourself free. There's a difference." After she hung up, Vivian sat in the quiet house and cried. Not sad tears, not happy tears, just tears that needed to come out. She'd spent 8 years building something that could exist without her, and now she had to decide if that was a failure or a gift. When Caleb came home that evening, he found Vivian in the kitchen, cooking dinner. Emma was at the table doing homework. Everything looked normal, but Caleb could tell something had shifted. "We need to talk," Vivian said. Emma looked up, worried. "Not now," Vivian said gently to her. After dinner, they ate in tense silence. Emma kept looking between them, clearly anxious. When dinner was over, Emma went to her room without being asked. Caleb and Vivian sat at the table facing each other. "I talked to my COO today," Vivian said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "And?" "And he told me the company would be fine without me." "So you're going back." "Let me finish." Vivian took a breath. "I spent 8 years building something to prove I was worth something. But the truth is, I've been so busy proving my worth to everyone else that I forgot to figure out what actually makes me happy." "What does make you happy?" "This, you, Emma, sitting at your table eating burnt pancakes, helping with homework, being part of something that isn't about money or power or proving anything to anyone." Caleb stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not going back, not as CEO. I'm stepping down." "Vivian, I'm not done. I'll stay on the board. I'll be involved, but I'm not running the day-to-day anymore. I'm choosing a different life." "You can't do that, not for me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. You just happen to be part of what I want." Caleb stood up and paced across the kitchen. "This is a huge decision. You can't just throw away everything you built." "I'm not throwing it away. I'm choosing something else." "Is that so hard to believe?" "What if you regret it? What if I don't? What if we don't work out?" Vivian stood up and walked over to him. "Then I'll deal with it, but I'm tired of making decisions based on fear. I'm tired of protecting myself from things that might not even happen." She took his hands. "I love you, Caleb. I'm in love with you, and I want to build a life with you. Here, in this town, with Emma. If you'll let me." Caleb looked at her, his eyes wet. "You love me?" "Yes." "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "I love you too," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm terrified, but I love you." They stood there holding each other until Emma's voice came from the hallway. "Does this mean she's staying?" They pulled apart. Emma was standing in the doorway, her eyes hopeful. Vivian smiled. "Yeah, I'm staying." Emma ran to them and threw her arms around both of them. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Hope. The next morning felt different, lighter somehow, like something heavy had finally been set down. Caleb woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Emma's laughter coming from the kitchen. When he walked in, he found Vivian at the stove, attempting to flip pancakes, while Emma gave her increasingly dramatic instructions. "No, you have to wait for the bubbles," Emma said. "See? Like that. Now flip it. Quick." Vivian flipped, and the pancake landed halfway on the spatula, halfway on the counter. "Close enough," Vivian said, laughing. Emma shook her head in mock disappointment. "We need to work on your technique." Caleb leaned against the doorframe, watching them. This was his kitchen. His daughter. his life. And now Vivian was in it, burning pancakes and laughing like she'd always been there. "You just gonna stand there?" Vivian asked, noticing him. "Maybe. Come help before I ruin all of them." He walked over and took the spatula from her hand. "Go sit. I'll finish." "I can do it." "I know you can, but I actually want these to be edible." Vivian swatted his arm but sat down next to Emma, who was grinning like she'd just won something. They ate breakfast together, and for the first time in weeks, nobody mentioned leaving or going back or what came next. They just existed in the moment, and it was enough. After Emma left for school, Vivian started making phone calls. Caleb could hear her in the living room, her voice professional and firm as she talked to lawyers, board members, her assistant. He didn't eavesdrop, but he caught enough to know she was serious. She was really doing this, stepping down, restructuring her entire life. When she finally came back into the kitchen, she looked exhausted but relieved. "How'd it go?" Caleb asked. "Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped." She sat down heavily. "They're not happy, but they're not fighting me either. I think they're too shocked to fight." "Any regrets?" She looked at him. "Ask me in 6 months." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." Caleb poured her more coffee. "What happens next?" "I finish the transition, train my replacement, make sure everything's stable. That'll take a few weeks, maybe a month. I'll have to go back to the city for some of it." Caleb felt his stomach drop. "How long?" "A week at a time, maybe less. I'll come back on weekends." "And after that?" "After that, I'm here. For good." It sounded simple when she said it like that, but Caleb knew it wouldn't be. Nothing about this was simple. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "After you're done with all that, you can't just sit around here doing nothing." "Why not?" "Because you're not built that way. You need something to work toward." Vivian smiled. "You know me pretty well for someone who's only known me 2 months. So what's the plan?" "I don't know yet. Maybe consulting. Maybe starting something smaller, something I can manage from anywhere. Or maybe I'll finally learn to slow down." She looked at him. "Is that okay? Not having all the answers?" "It has to be." That week, Vivian flew back to the city twice. Each time, Caleb felt the same knot in his stomach when she left, the same relief when she came back. Emma handled it better than he did, texting Vivian constantly, sending pictures of her school projects, demanding video calls before bed. "She's coming back, Dad," Emma said one night when she caught him staring at his phone. "I know." "Then why do you look so worried?" "I'm not worried." "You're a terrible liar." Caleb sighed. "What if something happens and she changes her mind?" "Then we deal with it. But you can't spend all your time waiting for something bad to happen. That's not fair to her, or to you." "Since when did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't listen." He pulled her into a hug. "I'm listening now." On Friday night, Vivian came back from the city looking different. Her hair was shorter, cut to her shoulders. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of the tailored clothes she used to wear. "You cut your hair," Emma said immediately. "I needed a change." Vivian ran her hand through it self-consciously. "Do you like it?" "I love it. You look less scary." Vivian laughed. "I was scary before?" "A little. In a cool way." That night, after Emma went to bed, Caleb and Vivian sat on the porch. It was cold, but neither of them wanted to go inside yet. "How was it?" Caleb asked. "Being back?" "Strange. Like visiting somewhere I used to live but don't anymore." She pulled her jacket tighter. "I had lunch with my COO. He's doing great. Better than I expected, honestly. The company's in good hands." "That's good." "It is. It's also terrifying." "Why?" "Because if they don't need me, then who am I?" Caleb took her hand. "You're Vivian, the woman who drove an hour to thank a stranger for changing a tire, the woman who helped my daughter with her homework and didn't complain when she got glitter all over her clothes, the woman who burned pancakes this morning and laughed about it. That's not much of an identity. It's everything." Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm scared, Caleb." "Of what?" "Of messing this up, of realizing I'm not cut out for this kind of life, of waking up one day and missing what I had." "You might, and that would be okay. Would it?" "We'd figure it out. That's what we do." They sat in silence for a while. Then Vivian said, "I bought a house." Caleb went still. "What?" "A house. Here in Mercer. It's small, needs work, but it's mine. I closed on it yesterday." "You bought a house?" "I did. Without telling me. I wanted it to be a surprise." Caleb didn't know what to say. A house meant permanence, commitment. It meant she was really staying. "Where is it?" he asked finally. 3 blocks from here. The old Miller place, you know it?" He did. It had been empty for 2 years, the paint peeling, the yard overgrown. "That place is a disaster." "I know, but it has good bones, and I've always wanted a project." "You're going to fix it yourself?" "With help. I was hoping you'd help, actually. Teach me how things work. I've never fixed anything in my life that didn't involve a computer." Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd run a billion-dollar company and was now talking about fixing up an old house in a town of 2,000 people. "You're serious about this," he said. "I'm serious about you. The house is just part of it." He kissed her then, long and slow, and when they pulled apart, she was smiling. "Does this mean you'll help?" she asked. "Yeah, I'll help." The next few weeks were chaos in the best way. Vivian started working on the house during the day while Caleb was at the garage. She'd send him pictures of her progress, which mostly involved her covered in dust and looking frustrated. He'd come by after work and find her sitting on the floor surrounded by paint samples, completely overwhelmed. "I don't know the difference between eggshell and satin," she said one day. "Then pick the one you like." "But what if I pick wrong?" "It's paint, Vivian. You can always change it." She looked at him like he'd just solved a complex equation. "You're right. It's just paint." Emma loved the house. She'd come over after school and help Vivian pick colors, offering opinions on everything from cabinet hardware to which rooms should be which. Vivian listened to every suggestion seriously, even the ones that made no sense. "I think the bathroom should be purple," Emma said one day. "Purple it is," Vivian said. "Really? Why not?" Caleb watched them together, his daughter and this woman who'd somehow become part of their lives, and felt something settle in his chest. This was real. This was happening, but not everyone was thrilled about it. One Saturday, Caleb brought Vivian to meet Hank properly. They walked into the garage and Hank looked up from the engine he was working on, his expression neutral. "So, you're the famous Vivian," Hank said. "That's me," Vivian said, extending her hand. Hank wiped his hands on a rag and shook it. "Hank, I've heard a lot about you." "All good things, I hope." "Mostly." Hank looked at Caleb. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Caleb followed him to the back of the garage. Hank crossed his arms and gave him a long look. "You sure about this?" Hank asked quietly. "About what?" "About her. About all of this. You're moving pretty fast." "I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" "Because 2 months ago you were convinced she'd leave. Now she's buying houses and playing family with Emma. What happens when the novelty wears off?" "It's not a novelty." "How do you know?" Caleb felt his jaw tighten. "Because I know her, and I trust her." "You barely know her." "I know enough," Hank sighed. "Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I just don't want to see you get hurt. Or worse, see Emma get hurt. She's not going to hurt us." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can choose to trust her anyway." Hank looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, just be careful." When Caleb came back, Vivian was looking at a truck on the lift, asking the other mechanic questions about the suspension. She fit in better than he'd expected, better than he'd hoped. That night, lying in bed, Vivian asked him about it. "What did Hank say to you?" "He's worried." "About what?" "About us moving too fast, about you leaving." Vivian rolled over to face him. "Do you think we're moving too fast?" "Sometimes, but then I think about what the alternative is, and I don't want that either." "What's the alternative?" "Taking it slow, being careful, protecting ourselves, and probably missing out on something great because we're too scared to go for it." "So we're going for it." "Yeah, we are." She kissed him, and he pulled her closer, and for a while nothing else mattered. But the doubts didn't go away completely. They lingered at the edges, showing up at unexpected moments. When Vivian's phone rang with a call from her old office, and she'd step outside to take it, her voice shifting back into CEO mode. When she'd get frustrated with something at the house, and he'd see the flash of the person she used to be. the one who expected things to work perfectly the first time. One night, about a month after she'd bought the house, they had another fight. It started over something stupid. Vivian wanted to hire contractors to finish the renovations faster. Caleb thought they should keep doing it themselves. "It's taking too long," Vivian said. "At this rate, I won't be able to move in for 6 months." "So, what's the rush?" "I'm living out of a suitcase in a hotel room, Caleb. I'd like to have my own space." "You could stay here." "That's not the same thing." "Why not?" "Because this is your house, your space. I need something that's mine. So hire the contractors. I don't care." "You clearly do care, or you wouldn't be arguing with me about it." Caleb set down the paint roller he'd been using. "You want to know what I care about? I care that you're trying to throw money at a problem instead of just being patient." "Not everything can be solved by being patient, Caleb. Sometimes you need to actually get things done." "Is that what you think I do? Just sit around and wait for things to happen?" "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." Vivian's eyes flashed. "You know what? Maybe I am being impatient. Maybe I'm used to things moving faster than they do in small towns. But that doesn't make me wrong. And it doesn't make me wrong for wanting to do things the way I've always done them." They stood there facing each other across the half-painted living room, and Caleb felt the weight of everything they weren't saying. "This isn't about contractors," Vivian said quietly. "No, it's not." "Then what is it about?" Caleb ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know. Maybe it's about the fact that you're used to having control over everything, and now you're in a situation where you can't control the outcome. And you're used to keeping people at a distance so they can't hurt you. So which one of us is more screwed up?" "Both of us, probably." Vivian laughed, but it came out bitter. "Great. So we're both a mess. What do we do about it?" "I don't know." She picked up her jacket. "I'm going for a walk." "Vivian, I just need some air. I'll be back." She left, and Caleb stood alone in the half-finished house, surrounded by paint cans and drop cloths, wondering how they'd gotten here. She came back an hour later. Caleb was still there, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. "I'm sorry," she said. "Me too." She sat down next to him. "I hired the contractors before we fought." "I know." "How did you know?" "Because you don't ask permission. You make decisions and deal with the consequences later." "Is that a bad thing?" "Sometimes. But it's also one of the things I love about you." Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder. "I don't know how to do this. Be with someone, share decisions, let someone else have a say in my life." "Neither do I. I've been doing everything alone for 3 years. So we're both learning." "Yeah. What if we're bad at it? Then we keep practicing until we get better." She took his hand. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you." They sat there on the dusty floor until it got dark, and when they finally left, Caleb felt like they'd crossed some invisible line. They'd fought, really fought, and they'd come out the other side still together. 2 weeks later, the contractors finished the house. It looked completely different. Fresh paint, new floors, updated kitchen. Vivian had turned it into something beautiful. "What do you think?" she asked as Caleb walked through it. "It's amazing. It feels like mine now." "Good." She grabbed his hand. "Come see the backyard." She led him outside where she'd set up a small table with 2 chairs and string lights overhead. "I thought we could have dinner here sometimes," she said. "The 3 of us. Make it a thing." Caleb looked at her, this woman who'd walked away from everything to build a life here, and felt his chest tighten. "Marry me," he said. Vivian froze. "What?" "Marry me. I don't have a ring. I didn't plan this, but I want you to marry me." "Caleb, I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but I don't care. I love you. I want to build a life with you, a real one. So marry me." Vivian stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. "You're serious, like, completely. We've only known each other 3 months. I know. We've fought more times than I can count. I know that too. I'm terrible at being patient. You're terrible at letting people in. We're both a mess." "I know. Marry me anyway." She laughed, wiping at her eyes. "You're insane. Is that a yes?" It's a maybe. Ask me again when you have a ring and you've thought about it for more than 5 seconds. I've been thinking about it for weeks. Then you should know better than to propose in a backyard that still smells like paint. Caleb pulled her close. I'll ask again. With a ring. Somewhere better than this. Good. Because I want the full thing. The whole romantic gesture. You want romance? You're with the wrong guy. No, Vivian said, kissing him. I'm with exactly the right guy. That night, Caleb told Emma what he'd done. You proposed? Emma shrieked. Sort of. What do you mean, sort of? She said to ask again with a ring. So she said yes. She said maybe. Emma rolled her eyes. That's a yes, Dad. You're so bad at this. Apparently. Are you going to get a ring? Yeah. Can I help pick it out? Caleb smiled. Yeah, you can help. 2 days later, Caleb and Emma went to the only jewelry store in the county. It was small, family-owned, and the selection wasn't huge. But Emma took it seriously, examining every ring like she was choosing the most important thing in the world. This one, she said finally, pointing to a simple gold band with a small diamond. You sure? It's perfect. It's not too big or too fancy. It's just right. Like Vivian. The jeweler smiled. Your daughter has good taste. She gets it from her mom, Caleb said. He bought the ring, and that night he kept it in his pocket, waiting for the right moment. But the right moment didn't come. Days passed, then a week. Every time he thought about asking, something got in the way. Work. Emma's school stuff. Life. Finally, Vivian called him out on it. You have the ring, don't you? She said one night. How did you know? Because you keep touching your pocket, and you've been acting weird all week. I'm not acting weird. You are. Just ask me already. I'm waiting for the right moment. There's no such thing as the perfect moment, Caleb. Just ask. He pulled out the ring. They were sitting on his couch. Emma was asleep. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't special, but it was real. Vivian Cole, he said. Will you marry me? She looked at the ring, then at him. Yes. That's it? Just yes? What else do you want? I don't know. A speech, maybe? She laughed and kissed him. I love you. I want to marry you. I want to spend the rest of my life in this small town with you and Emma. Is that enough of a speech? Yeah, that's enough. He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. The next morning, Emma came into the kitchen and saw the ring immediately. She said yes, Emma yelled, throwing her arms around both of them. She said yes, Caleb confirmed. Emma pulled back, grinning. When's the wedding? We haven't talked about that yet, Vivian said. Can I be in it? Of course. Can we have it here, in Mercer? Vivian looked at Caleb. What do you think? I think anywhere is fine as long as you're there. That's so corny, Dad, Emma said. Let me have this. They spent the rest of breakfast planning, Emma throwing out ideas faster than either of them could keep up. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb let himself believe that this was really happening, that he'd found someone worth the risk, that they were going to make it. Planning a wedding turned out to be harder than either of them expected, not because they disagreed on things, but because Vivian had never planned anything that wasn't a business strategy, and Caleb had never planned anything bigger than Emma's birthday parties. Do we need a wedding planner? Vivian asked one night, staring at a list that seemed to grow longer every time she looked at it. I don't know, do we? I have no idea. I've never done this before. Neither have I. They looked at each other and started laughing. We're terrible at this, Vivian said. The worst. Emma walked in, saw them laughing over a pile of wedding magazines, and shook her head. You two need help. That's what we're saying, Caleb said. Then let me help. I'm good at planning. You're 9. So? I planned my entire birthday party last year, and it was perfect. Vivian smiled. She's got a point. So Emma became their unofficial wedding coordinator, creating spreadsheets and timelines that would have made Vivian's former assistant proud. She took it seriously, asking questions neither Caleb nor Vivian had thought to ask, making decisions when they got stuck. Small wedding or big wedding? Emma asked one afternoon. Small, they both said at the same time. Good. That's easier. Where? Here, Vivian said. In Mercer. Maybe at the house? Caleb looked at her. Your house? Our house. If we're getting married, it should be ours, right? He hadn't thought about that. About the house being theirs. About building something together that belonged to both of them. Yeah, he said. Our house. Emma wrote it down. When? Soon, Vivian said. How soon? I don't know. 3 months? Caleb raised an eyebrow. That's fast. We've already established we do everything fast. Why stop now? Fair point. Emma grinned. 3 months it is. That gives us until June. We can have it in the backyard. I'll help you plan everything. And she did. Over the next few weeks, Emma threw herself into wedding planning with the kind of focus Caleb had only seen when she was working on a school project she actually cared about. She researched flowers, made seating charts, even designed invitations on the computer. She's enjoying this way too much, Caleb said one night, watching Emma show Vivian different font options. Let her enjoy it. How many kids get to help plan their parents' wedding? I'm not technically her parent yet. Vivian looked at him. You want me to adopt her? Make it official? The question caught him off guard. You'd do that? Of course I would. If you want me to. If Emma wants me to. We should ask her. They did, that night after dinner. Emma's face went through about 5 different emotions before she finally spoke. You want to adopt me? She asked Vivian. Only if you want me to. I know I'm not your mom. I'm never going to try to replace her. But I love you, and I want to be part of your family officially. Emma looked at Caleb. Is this okay with you? It's more than okay. Emma turned back to Vivian. Can I still call you Vivian, or do I have to call you Mom? You can call me whatever feels right. Emma thought about it for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay, let's do it. Vivian pulled her into a hug, and Caleb saw tears in both their eyes. He joined the hug, wrapping his arms around both of them, and felt something complete inside him. This was his family. Imperfect and messy and absolutely real. The adoption process started the next week. It meant paperwork and lawyers and court dates, all of which Vivian handled with the same efficiency she'd once used to run a company. But Caleb noticed something different about her now. She wasn't doing it to prove anything or to check boxes. She was doing it because she wanted to, because it mattered. You're different, he told her one night. Different how? Happier, more relaxed. I am happier and more relaxed. Turns out not running a billion-dollar company is actually kind of nice. You miss it at all? She considered the question. Sometimes. I miss the challenge of it, the problem solving. But I don't miss the pressure, the constant feeling that if I stopped for even a second, everything would fall apart. So what are you going to do? Long term? I've been thinking about that actually. I want to start something new, smaller, a consulting firm maybe. Help other companies build sustainable structures so their founders don't burn out like I did. That sounds good. It does, doesn't it? I could do it from here, take on a few clients, work from home, actually have a life outside of work. You've really thought this through. I have. Is that okay? Why wouldn't it be? Because I know you were worried I'd get bored. That small-town life wouldn't be enough for me. Caleb pulled her close. Are you bored? Not even a little bit. Then I'm not worried. But the truth was, he's still worried sometimes. Late at night, when Vivian was asleep beside him, he'd lie awake and wonder if this was real. If she'd really chosen this life. If she'd really chosen him. One Saturday morning, about a month before the wedding, those fears came to a head. Vivian's former CFO called. Caleb was in the kitchen when he heard her answer, her voice immediately shifting into business mode. He tried not to listen, but the house was small and sound carried. I understand the situation, Vivian was saying, but I'm not coming back. No, that's final. You need to handle it without me. A pause. I know it's a lot of money, but money isn't everything. No, I'm not being naive. I'm being realistic about what actually matters to me. Another pause, longer this time. You don't get to tell me I'm making a mistake. I spent 8 years building that company, and I get to decide when I'm done. And I'm done. She hung up, and Caleb heard her let out a long breath. He walked into the living room. She was sitting on the couch, staring at her phone. Everything okay? He asked. They want me to come back. There's some crisis with a major client. They're offering me double my old salary to fix it. Caleb felt his stomach drop. What did you tell them? I said no. Just like that? Just like that. She looked up at him. You thought I'd say yes? I thought you'd be tempted. I was, for about 5 seconds. Then I remembered why I left, and I remembered what I have here. She stood up and walked over to him. I'm not going back, Caleb. Not for any amount of money. This is my life now, you and Emma and this town. That's what I want. Even when it gets hard, even when you miss the work? Even then, because the work was never the point. I thought it was, for a long time. I thought if I built something big enough, I'd finally feel like I mattered. But I was wrong. I mattered the whole time. I just couldn't see it. She took his hands. You make me feel like I matter. Emma makes me feel like I matter. This life we're building, it's small and quiet and nothing like what I had before. And it's everything I actually needed. Caleb kissed her, and when they pulled apart, some of his fear had dissolved. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For doubting you. For waiting for you to leave. You're not waiting anymore? No. I'm done waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm choosing to trust this, to trust you, to trust us. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of wedding preparations and adoption paperwork and normal everyday life. Vivian officially moved into the house, and they spent weekends making it truly theirs. Caleb built bookshelves for Vivian's collection, which had been in storage for months. Vivian planted a garden in the backyard with Emma, neither of them knowing what they were doing but trying anyway. Hank came over one Saturday to help Caleb build a deck. They worked in silence for a while before Hank finally spoke. I owe you an apology, Hank said. For what? For doubting her, for thinking she'd leave. I was wrong. You were protecting me. Maybe, but I should have trusted your judgment. You're a smart guy, Caleb, smarter than you give yourself credit for. I'm a mechanic who got lucky. You're a man who took a chance on something good. That's not luck. That's courage. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. He just kept hammering, and Hank kept working beside him, and it felt like something had been settled between them. The adoption went through 2 weeks before the wedding. The judge was an older woman who'd lived in Mercer her whole life and remembered Caleb's wife. She looked at Vivian carefully, like she was trying to see past the polished exterior to the person underneath. Why do you want to adopt Emma? The judge asked. Because I love her, Vivian said simply. Because she's already my daughter in every way that matters. I just want it to be official. And you understand this is permanent? That you're taking on all the responsibilities of parenthood? I do, and I'm ready for it. The judge looked at Emma. What about you? Do you want Vivian to adopt you? Emma nodded. Yes. She's already part of our family. This just makes it real. The judge smiled. Then I'm happy to grant this adoption. Congratulations to all of you. Emma threw her arms around Vivian, who held her tight, tears streaming down her face. Caleb joined them, and for a moment they just stood there in the courthouse, holding each other. A family made official by paperwork, but real long before any judge said so. That night, they celebrated with ice cream and a movie. Emma fell asleep on the couch between them, and Caleb and Vivian looked at each other over her head. We did it, Vivian whispered. Yeah, we did. 2 weeks until we're married. You nervous? Terrified. You? Same. They sat there, Emma sleeping between them, and Caleb thought about how far they'd come, from a flat tire on a mountain highway to this moment. From strangers to something more. From separate lives to one shared life that was still being written. The wedding day arrived faster than either of them expected. It was a perfect June morning, warm but not too hot, with a breeze that carried the smell of the flowers Emma and Vivian had planted weeks before. The ceremony was small, just like they'd wanted. Rosie from the diner was there, Hank and his wife, Emma's teacher and a few of her friends, some of Caleb's co-workers from the garage, and Vivian's former assistant, who'd driven 5 hours to be there because she said she wouldn't miss it for anything. They got married in the backyard of their house, under the string lights Vivian had hung months ago when she'd first bought the place. Emma stood between them, holding the rings, her face serious with the weight of her responsibility. The officiant was the same judge who'd approved the adoption. She kept it simple, no flowery language or grand pronouncements, just the basics, the promises, the commitment. When it came time for vows, Caleb went first. I'm not good with words, he started, and Emma giggled. But I'm going to try. Vivian, you came into my life when I wasn't looking for anyone, when I'd convinced myself I was fine alone. And you didn't just change my life. You reminded me what it felt like to want something, to hope for something, to believe that good things could still happen. His voice caught, and he had to stop for a second. You're brave and brilliant and stubborn as hell. You make terrible pancakes and you're learning to garden, even though you kill every plant you touch. You love my daughter like she's yours. And you chose this life, this small town, this regular guy, over everything else you could have had. I don't know what I did to deserve that, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it. Vivian was crying now, and so was Emma. And honestly, most of the guests. Vivian took a breath and started her vows. Caleb, 8 years ago you saved me in a parking lot. You didn't know who I was or what I was going through. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped. You asked for nothing in return. You just did the right thing because that's who you are. She wiped her eyes. And then, when I found you again, you did it again. You helped me fix my car. You had coffee with me. You let me into your life even though it scared you. You introduced me to your daughter. You showed me what it looks like to build a life based on what actually matters. I spent years trying to prove I was worth something, building companies, making money, checking boxes. But none of it made me feel the way you make me feel. Seen, real, enough. You didn't fall in love with my success or my money. You fell in love with me, just me. And that's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me. She took his hands. I promise to love you exactly as you are. I promise to be patient when you pull away because you're scared. I promise to help Emma with her homework and burn pancakes and plant gardens that die. I promise to build a life with you that's not perfect but is ours. And I promise that no matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere. This is where I belong. The judge pronounced them married, and Caleb kissed Vivian while Emma cheered and everyone clapped. The reception was in the same backyard with food from Rosie's Diner and a playlist Emma had spent weeks perfecting. There was no first dance, no fancy cake, no formal speeches, just people eating and talking and celebrating two people who'd found each other against all odds. Emma danced with both of them, her face lit up with joy. Hank shook Caleb's hand and told him he was happy for him, and actually meant it. Vivian's former assistant pulled her aside and told her she'd never seen her look so happy. I am happy, Vivian said, happier than I've ever been. It shows. You look different, lighter. I feel lighter, like I've been carrying something heavy for years and I finally put it down. As the sun set and the string lights came on, Caleb found Vivian standing alone at the edge of the yard, looking at the house. What are you thinking about? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. About how different my life is now. About how a year ago I would have laughed if someone told me I'd be married to a mechanic in a small town, raising a daughter and planting gardens. Good different or bad different? The best different. She turned to face him. I used to think success meant building something huge, something that would last forever. But I was building in the wrong direction, up instead of deep, wide instead of strong. And now? Now I'm building something that actually matters. A family, a home, a life I don't want to escape from. Caleb kissed her forehead. I love you. I love you too. Emma ran over, grabbing both their hands. Come on, they're cutting the cake. They followed her back to the party, and Caleb looked around at these people who'd become their family. His family. Their family. 6 months later, Vivian's consulting firm was thriving. She worked from home 3 days a week, traveled to the city once a month, and had found a balance she'd never thought possible. She was good at her job, maybe better than before because she wasn't doing it to prove anything. She was doing it because she enjoyed it. Emma was thriving too. She'd started calling Vivian Mom without anyone prompting her. It had just happened one day at dinner, natural and easy, and Vivian had cried happy tears while Emma acted like it was no big deal. Caleb still worked at the garage, but now he came home to a house full of life. To a wife who asked about his day and actually wanted to hear the answer. To a daughter who was growing up with 2 parents who loved her and each other. One night lying in bed, Vivian asked him something. Do you ever think about that day on the highway when I had the flat tire? Sometimes. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just driven past? All the time. Me too. She rolled over to look at him. I think about all the things that had to go right for us to end up here. The flat tire. Me recognizing you. You actually showing up at the airport. All of it. You think it was fate? I think it was a lot of small choices that added up to something big. You chose to stop. I chose to come back. You chose to let me in. I chose to stay. None of it was inevitable. We could have messed it up 100 different ways. But we didn't. No, we didn't. Caleb pulled her close. Best decision I ever made, stopping for that car. Best decision I ever made was getting that flat tire in the first place. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Caleb thought about the strange path that had brought them here. All the fear and doubt and risk, all the times he'd almost pushed her away, all the times she'd almost left. But they'd fought for this, both of them. They'd chosen each other over and over again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And that, more than anything else, was what made it real. A year after the wedding, they were in the backyard again. Emma was helping Vivian with the garden, which still wasn't thriving but wasn't completely dead either. Caleb was working on the deck, adding a section they'd been planning for months. "Dad," Emma called. "Come look at this." He walked over. Emma was pointing at a tiny green shoot coming up from the soil. "The tomatoes are growing," Emma said. "I told you they would." "You were right," Vivian said, ruffling her hair. "You're the gardening expert now." "We're all learning," Emma said wisely. "That's what families do." Caleb looked at his daughter, who was growing up so fast it scared him sometimes. Looked at his wife, who was covered in dirt and smiling wider than he'd ever seen her smile in the early days. Looked at the life they'd built together, imperfect and messy and absolutely real. This was what mattered, not the money Vivian had walked away from, not the perfect life Caleb had thought was impossible, not the neat, tidy story where everything worked out exactly as planned. This, the dirt under their fingernails, the projects half finished, the dinners that sometimes burned, the fights they had and worked through, the love that wasn't always easy, but was always worth it. Because at the end of the day, life wasn't about building empires or protecting yourself from pain or waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. It was about showing up, taking chances, choosing love even when you're terrified, letting people in even when it would be easier to stay closed off. It was about fixing flat tires for strangers and giving them your name, about driving back to small towns to find the person who saved you once before, about proposing in backyards that smell like paint and getting married under string lights with the people who actually matter. It was about building something deep instead of wide, strong instead of impressive, real instead of perfect. And as Caleb stood there watching his wife and daughter argue about the best way to stake a tomato plant, he realized something. He'd spent 3 years after his first wife died thinking he'd never be whole again, that the best he could hope for was to get through each day without falling apart. But he'd been wrong. He wasn't whole because he'd found someone to complete him. He was whole because he'd learned to open himself up to the possibility of love again, because he'd taken the risk, because he'd chosen to believe that good things could still happen, even after the worst had already happened. Vivian wasn't his second chance. She was his reminder that life keeps moving forward, whether you're ready or not. And you can either close yourself off to protect against the pain, or you can stay open and risk everything for the chance at something real. He'd chosen to stay open, and it had changed everything. "You coming?" Vivian called. "We need your opinion on whether these need more water or less water." "They need less," Caleb said, walking over. "See?" Emma said to Vivian. "I told you." "Fine. You and your dad clearly know more about this than I do." "We've just had more practice," Caleb said, pulling her close. "You'll get there." "Promise?" "Promise." Later that night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Caleb and Vivian sat on the porch like they did most nights. Vivian had her head on his shoulder. His arm was around her waist. "I was thinking," Vivian said. About how much my life has changed, and how I used to think change was scary, something to control and manage and prepare for. But now I think change is just life, and the scary part isn't the change itself, it's refusing to change when you need to. Is this your way of saying you want to plant more vegetables? She laughed. Maybe. But I'm also saying I'm glad I changed, glad I took the risk, glad I chose this life over the one I had before. No regrets? Not a single one. You? Caleb thought about it. Thought about all the fear and doubt that had almost kept him from this moment. All the times he'd almost said no when he should have said yes. No regrets, he said. Just gratitude. For what? For flat tires, for second chances, for you. Vivian kissed him, and they sat there in the quiet night, two people who'd found each other against all odds and chosen to build something real. Not perfect, not easy, not the life either of them had planned, but theirs. Completely and absolutely theirs. And that was more than enough. It was everything.